Hi, my name is Hannah Daniel, and today we are going to be talking about how to craft an introduction to a research essay. Writing an introduction to a research essay can be difficult at best. It is important to remember that research papers are of the problem-solution genre in which the writer identifies a problem in the introductory paragraph and seeks to find a solution to that problem in the body paragraphs and conclusion. The introductory paragraph or paragraphs are important to any research essay because it sets the tone of the paper, engages the interest of the reader, and lays the foundation for the rest of what you will develop in the body paragraph. So what belongs in an introduction? An introductory paragraph should consist of 6 crucial elements: the hook, the research question, the literary review, the significance or research problem, the thesis, and advanced organizer. The hook, thesis, and advanced organizer, as indicated in blue, always have to remain in the same spot. The hook should always be your very first sentence, and your thesis and advanced organizer should always be your very last. Though the order modeled on the screen is ideal, the research question, the literary review, and the research problem are subject to change in order as the writer sees fit. These 6 elements are extremely important to an introduction, and if executed properly, one will have a good foundation for a strong paper. To understand how good writers write introductions, I thought it would be helpful if we looked at an example and then broke down the paragraph by identifying each of the 6 elements and the important role they play in your paper. Shall we have a look at our example? Looking back on the American tradition, history shows how race played an integral part of American life and American literature. Joanna Brooks argues that writers of color, such as Native and African Americans, are displaced by education and religious affiliation, but also disqualified by race from full assimilation to white society. This begs the question, how do writers in the early American tradition perceive the relationship between race and Christianity? The implications of conflating race and religion have lasting effects on the way present-day believers share Christ in a missional, multi-ethnic setting. In the American tradition, writers of color understood white European culture as inseparable from Christianity. In their writing, authors like Cabeza de Vaca, Phyllis Wheatley, and Sansom Occam display a false equivalence of white European culture and Christianity. So let's take a look at the very first thing in an introductory paragraph, the hook. A hook is a creative first sentence that begins your research essay. You don't want to just jump into your argument. You want to ease into your topic, going from general to specific. Hooks can be quotes from an expert in the field in which you are writing, a shocking statistic, a blunt statement, or anything that will immediately engage your reader. While the example in this paragraph is not the most exciting, it does generally introduce the topic of discussion. Looking back on the American tradition, history shows how race played an integral part of American life and American literature. It's as simple as that. Good writers often craft a brief literature review in their essays so that they can situate their perspective among and against other major perspectives. Again, the attempt is to get narrower in discussion and closer to the thesis. In a literature review, research writers typically situate their argument in relation to the critical context or ongoing conversation. Oftentimes, literature reviews highlight the opposing viewpoint or position on the topic in which your paper is about. Additionally, like in the example, the literature review can negate a research question. Keep in mind, writers show their research and broad knowledge of a topic by describing the opposing viewpoints accurately and fairly, in addition to research supporting their own hypothesis. In this example, I used my literature review to negate my question. Yet, what Joanna Brooks says is something that one could agree or disagree with, which will probe my research question. Let's take a look. Joanna Brooks argues that writers of color, such as Native and African Americans, are, quote, displaced by education and religious affiliations, but also disqualified by race from full assimilation to white society, end quote. It's important when you're writing a literature review to use a specific quote by a specific person if you can, as opposed to generalizing, saying something like, critics often say, or some scholars often write. Your research essay and your literature review will be stronger if you can give a specific name and a specific quote. So let's talk about the research question. The thesis is the backbone to your research paper, but what is the backbone to your thesis? You guessed it, a research question. A bad research question is too general and too easily answered. It doesn't address an arguable issue. Good research questions ask a specific question and have an even more specific answer. Your research question should be narrow and deep, not wide and shallow. The more specific your research question is, the more specific your thesis statement will be, thus creating a better, stronger paper. Your questions should be specific and arguable. I interacted with my source by asking a question based on Brooks' statement. This begs the question, how do writers in the early American tradition perceive the relationship between race and Christianity? This question is specific, it is arguable, and it is asking for an arguable, specific thesis. The answer to this question cannot be general, it cannot be broad, and it cannot be unarguable. It is arguable, it is specific, and it is narrow. The research problem or significance simply lets your reader know why it is important that your question is answered. The research writers frame each essay to address not just a local question, but also a significant problem that extends outside of the local question being asked. The research problem often comes after the research question because it lets your reader know why answering the question is important and why your thesis matters. The research problem gives the writer and target audience more interest and motivation to read. Letting your reader know why it is important that you answer your question makes your reader care more about the content of the rest of your paper. To my question, how do writers in the early American tradition perceive the relationship between race and Christianity? The significance is that the implications of conflating race and religion have a lasting effect on the way present-day believers share Christ in a missional and multi-ethnic setting. I took a very specific question dealing with literature and specific people within that literature and applied it and saw a larger implication in the way Christians share Christ in their day-to-day lives. So answering this research question will have fruitful and effective application. Now we get to the most important part of the introductory paragraph, your thesis. Write your thesis out as a specific sentence at the end of your first paragraph where the reader expects to find it. What is a thesis? A thesis is a clear sentence that asserts the answer to a question you have posed, a solution to a problem you have identified, or a position statement on a debatable topic. Keep in mind that a thesis gives focus. Until the writer has a working thesis statement, he or she has no clear rationale for what to include or exclude from an essay. A paper without a thesis is not an argument, but merely a topic, while an argument is thesis-driven. Keep in mind also that writing your thesis out in a single specific sentence at the bottom of your first paragraph gives you focus as you write, and it also gives your reader the ability to track your argument and see that you are doing more than summarizing somebody else's argument. In this example, my thesis is answering my research question very, very specifically. Often, it is helpful for the writer to turn the question into a statement and answer it. For example, my research question was, how do writers in the early American tradition perceive the relationship between race and Christianity? I took that question and turned it into a statement that needed to be completed. In the American tradition, writers of color understood white European culture as inseparable from Christianity. Lastly comes your advanced organizer. Simply put, an advanced organizer gives your reader an idea of where you're going with the rest of your paper. Good communicators create an advanced organizer to outline the reasons supporting their thesis statement, usually placed immediately after the thesis statement and often in the form of a because clause or better, using a colon. If a colon or a because clause doesn't seem to quite work, you can always make your advanced organizer its own separate sentence after the thesis. In this example, I made it clear that I intend to first talk about Devaka, then weekly, then Occam. In the introduction, I opted for creating an advanced organizer that was entirely its own sentence, and my example is, in their writing, authors like Cabeza de Vaca, Phyllis Wheatley, and Samson Occam display a false equivalence of white European culture and Christianity. So what have we learned? The hook is a creative first sentence of your introductory paragraph. Your research question asks a specific and arguable question which negates a specific and arguable answer, which is your thesis statement. Your literature review situates your perspective among and against other major scholars within the field that you're writing. The significance or research problem answers the question of why answering your research question is important and what the larger issue that you are addressing actually is. Your thesis statement is the answer to your research question, and it is your main claim that you're basing your entire paper on, and it is what you will argue for throughout your body paragraphs. Your advanced organizer outlines your paper and lets the reader know where you intend to go and how you intend to argue for your thesis. For more information on elements of writing, please see the following resources.